Welcome to our weekly live broadcast where we drink some tea and talk about tea and life as well. As usual, we're going to start with 3 bowls of tea in silence. I hope you are somewhere peaceful, happy, and that you have some good tea to drink and some good water to put on top of that good tea. So let's start with some silence. Very nice. Nice 3 bowls. I hope you enjoyed that and that your 3 bowls were as nice as mine. I'd like to remind those of you who have not yet to sign up for our online course that's coming up next month. It should be really stellar. It's going to be exciting, and there's going to be a lot of material both for those who are beginning a tea practice and those who have one. So it's going to be a really wonderful chance to learn and grow and explore tea in a way we've never done before. So I'm very excited. I'm putting a lot of energy into it. I feel like it'll be really great. And you can find out more at teahutcourses.com. That's where the course is. We'll plug that below. For our discussions, I want to just continue with what we've been doing, which is exploring Zen slogans. Slogans are ways of condensing deep truths, like koans or proverbs or whatever, that can function to take you beyond rationality in the way that a koan does, but can also just be sources of contemplation and exploration and questioning, and that hopefully results in changes to our habit patterns and growth and new exploration and insight. I like these slogans because the brevity of our discussions once a week means that we can't possibly plumb the depths of these. Some of them you could even spend a lifetime contemplating, and that would just be on the intellectual level. That wouldn't even include the experiential and deeper truths available through them. So they are like open doorways. And as I always say, my relationship to teachings, both the teachings I receive and the teachings I give, is not as philosophical stances or arguments or testaments to the way things are, nor are they proscriptions or prescriptions in the sense of telling you what you should or should not do. I regard teachings as invitations to explore, as question making, as exploring and opening the I don't know mind, as we spoke about last week. And the I don't know mind isn't a mind of confusion. It's not a mind trying to find the answer to something and unable to do so, and therefore frustrated. It's not a mind of understanding versus not understanding. It's beyond that. It's a relationship to the unknown. So it's not about the I don't know of like, I would like to know, but right now I don't, but if I just furrow my brows and strive, I could learn that. It's a different relationship to the unknown. There's a lot of ways of relating to the unknown. One way of relating to the unknown is to chip away at it, to do experiments, to make discoveries, to recraft old knowledge and explore new areas, right? And the scientific method is the best way of utilizing that approach to the unknown. And this isn't mutually exclusive to that. It's just a different relationship to the unknown. I think the other 2 ways of relating to the unknown, one we could call the mythological, which is the stories and rituals, and the rituals and rites and ceremonies are the enactment of the myths, the stories that help us to orient our daily lives in a kind of mythopoetic way towards the unknown. And we do that with also even with stories, sometimes movies, even novels, or especially myths, when you add the sacred dimension. And then there's another way of relating to the unknown, which is, you could say, the mystical way, which is what we're talking about here, is in the I don't know mind. It's a way of relating without concepts, beyond understanding. So today's slogan, and another of my big favorites, is related to something we've been discussing around here quite regularly recently. And the slogan is, immersed in water, you reach out for a drink. Immersed in water, you reach out for a drink. This is a powerful one. And it's There's a lot in it. Again, that's why I like these slogans. They're far deeper and richer than I know, and they're far deeper and richer than I could articulate, and they're far deeper and richer than we could together discuss even for such a short time. So they leave you with homework. They leave you with more to chew on and more to think about and contemplate and question. And most importantly, more to actualize, to apply to your life and the way that you live. Because the way that you think and believe is not as important as the way you experience reality. Those are two different things. So this is a really deep one. And it's in part pointing out the dilemma of human existence and suffering, in the sense that we are like fish in the ocean, wandering around complaining that we're thirsty. We are immersed in being, and yet seeking more being, though we swim in it, and though actually you can't ever add more to the being as it is right now. So, first of all, there's the ordinary miracles. All the ordinary miracles. Not supernatural miracles, ordinary miracles. The miracle that we're on a giant blue ball flying through space at thousands of kilometers an hour. The miracle of billions of years of cosmic flow and construction that made this planet. The hundreds of millions of years of organic life, or billions of years, depending on when you want to start that the evolution of which evolved into this body, complicated. And then right now I'm surrounded by all that I need, by air, by water, by food, by the sun. I'm filled with all that I need, and all of the conditions for my peace and happiness are also in this moment, no matter what I'm experiencing. And yet, I'm thirsty. And we're constantly playing around with the objects of the thirst, in one way or another. Even Buddhist and spiritual people are often still just playing with the objects, but they're just playing the opposite game of push. But push and pull are the same rope. So playing with the objects in terms of pull is like, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that. If I had this, if I had that, then I'd feel abundant, right? That imaginary scarcity, imaginary lack. But how do you possibly fill an imaginary hole, right? How could you treat a person who, let's just use this as an analogy, had mental problems and was insane, and they honestly believed and perceived that they had a hole in their gut right here that went all the way through. And they're baffled, like many schizophrenics, by the fact that nobody else can see it. And they're constantly trying to grab anything they can to put it on there, right? Now, obviously, the way to treat this hole has nothing to do with putting stuff on it. Because no matter what they put on it, they can't cover it, they can't fill it. You can't fill an imaginary hole. The only possibility is for that person to wake up to the reality that there is no hole. That's the only thing. So again, playing with the objects in terms of pulling is thinking that, when I have some experience, more meditation, more money, more stuff, then I'll be able to quench this thirst. So trying to get things to quench the thirst. And then often spiritually it's the same game. I'll push on things. Aren't I holy? Aren't I cool? I am celibate. I don't have money. I don't need this. I don't need that. But that's the same game. That's thinking that the problem has something to do with the object. That in that system, the idea is that the pulling was the problem. And so once I push and keep that thing away, now I'll deal with the problem. The issue with that is that there's still the thirst. So thirst and trying to quench the thirst by acquiring experience or things And thirst and trying to quench it by not acquiring things, still there's thirst. The problem is the thirst itself. The problem has nothing to do with getting or not getting anything. If awakening resulted from a lack of resources, then this world would be a much more enlightened place, wouldn't it? But the poverty that is the core teaching of the Buddha and of Jesus has nothing to do with a lack of resources. You can find poor people who are actually more wrapped up in the delusion of craving than even rich people. St. John of the Cross famously said, right, I know some monks and nuns who are more attached to their rosaries than some kings are to their thrones. So it doesn't matter the possession is small or large. The possession isn't relevant. It's the craving that's relevant. It's the desire to fulfill an imaginary hole, an imaginary scarcity, an imaginary lack. And you can't fill that. You can't fill it by gathering things, nor can you fill it by pushing things away. Right? You have to address the issue itself, which is that immersed in water, you reach out for a drink. Which is that, in essence, this moment, in this present moment, right here, right now, I cannot possibly be more than I am. There's nothing you can add to this moment to make it more than what it is. And that includes experience, spiritual or material, so-called possession, which isn't real anyway. All possession means in the physical is proximity. Possession has relevance in the social/legal domain, but it has no relevance in the absolute domain. In other words, I call this bowl mine, and if I have a receipt in the legal and social realm, then that is relevant. It is mine, and if you steal it, I could take you to court and win. But on an absolute level, the atoms of this bowl do not belong to me. And calling them mine does not change them in any bit. They're just in proximity to me. They're this distance or that distance, but they're not mine. There's no possession. And so same with experience. There's nothing you can add to this moment. And there's also nothing you can take away from it. It can't be diminished either. It is full. So all that we seek really is here. Zen is not about becoming something, it's about being who you are naturally. And there's a lot of layers to this slogan that can go off in many different directions. I'm just focusing on one. But the one that I'm focusing on boils down to a very simple question that I think anyone who is rooted in self-cultivation and rooted in self-awareness and rooted in self-knowing must ultimately begin to ask on a regular basis, and ask deeply, experientially, and allow the asking, right? This exploration, I say teachings are invitations to explore. This exploration isn't just an intellectual exploration. It's not about accumulating knowledge. It's about changing the way you experience the world. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes knowledge can change the way that you experience the world, but it's often not. So you have to take these questions deeper. You have to digest them and metabolize them. And this one boils down to one of the most important questions that needs to be asked and asked and asked of yourself, from yourself to yourself. You have to ask this of yourself deeply, daily, repeatedly, until you unpack it, until you start to change. And the question is, and this slogan is a way to really come to terms with this question. The question is, why is it that all the things that I seek are always things I don't have? Why is it I'm always looking, why is it all the things I want are the things I don't have? It's a powerful question. The answer isn't some witty phrase. The transformation is in the asking, not in the answering. and repetitive, deep asking. Why is it that all the things that I want are things that I don't have? You can unpack this in 1,000 directions. For example, do the things that you used to want and didn't have. When you got them, did they fulfill you in the way that you thought they would? Etc., etc. This unpacks, it explodes, it goes very deep. Immersed in water, you reach out for a drink. It's quite powerful. You can think about it some more, contemplate, unravel, explore, ask questions. Ultimately, even rest in, I don't know. So, questions?
Questions from the app?
So we have questions from the app first. If you are a Global Tea App member, you can go in the app, put some questions in there for the next broadcast. Then if you can't even make it to the broadcast, your question's still answered. You could go watch it later.
Adam and Rita ask, the saying goes, if you are silent against forms of injustice, you stand on the side of the oppressor. How do you judge when is the best time to speak up against injustice and when is it better to just observe and watch the opinions of others unfold?
Mm. So this is the question basically about, I believe it's Churchill saying that, evil thrives when good men do nothing. And so when to just observe and when to take action against injustice. It's often assumed that Eastern traditions, Buddhism or Taoism, that they are like passive and that the goal is to be like some kind of a lump and just be kicked around like a bag. But this is not true. It's not. Zen never has anything to do with action. My role as a Zen teacher to my students, it is to me personally, this is just personally, I mean, certainly it was my teacher as well, but I don't know how much this has to do with the whole of Zen and other Zen teachers. But me personally, the content of your life, of someone else's life, is not my business at all. It's a violation for me to get involved. You want to be a fisherman or live in a nudist colony. You want to travel to Spain or to Japan. You want to, what you want to do with your life is not the business of Zen. Zen is about how you do what you do, not what you do. So, whether you should or should not protest or do this in this particular instance, whether you should take strong action or no action, really depends on the situation, and it's not my place to say. Zen is more about how you do what you do. And personally, this is personal, and also I could give you the Zen answer, the deeper wisdom answer of tradition, of lineage, but also my personal conviction that if you're going to stand up for injustice, and I absolutely fundamentally believe that there are times when we must take strong action and we must stand up for injustice, absolutely. But I don't have a list of those circumstances, because even if I made a list, the Buddha never made moral lists. He didn't like that. The universe is too complex, and it's not so simple as like, these 3 situations do this, these 10 situations do that. The landscape is complicated, and you have to be able to respond to particular situations. But I can give you some advice. First of all, hear both sides, always. Listen. Listen to the voice of that which you're resisting. Before you resist, listen. Without charge. We'll get to the charge in a minute, but just listen. If possible. I mean, obviously there are situations where strong action needs to happen in a minute, and then it has to just come from the gut. But if possible, if we're talking about, things that are going on, listen. Listen to both sides. As you suggested in the question, you said, when should one listen? Listening is important. Number 2, if you're going to take action, you have to do it with love. This is the teachings even of the greatest social warriors, in my opinion, in the history of this planet, right? People like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, who knew that you can't win, you can't defeat darkness by fighting it. And that goes for ourselves too when we start working on our own character defects. If you label your character defects enemy, and then you do them the favor of going blow for blow, you just strengthen them, and you yourself get mixed up in their darkness. Right? You defeat darkness by ardently pursuing the light. You turn on the light. When you turn on the light, those monsters become stuffed animals. And things aren't what you thought they were. So, love, even if somebody has a really wrong view, they're very ignorant. We all have areas where we are blind. We all have ignorance. We're all made, and some people are broken and dented more than others, and sometimes it's circumstantial, sometimes it's social, or all kinds of things. But the answer always is it's always more powerful and more courageous to show up with love than it is to show up with hate. It's always more challenging, more difficult, more powerful, and more lasting. So if you're going to stand up, you have to stand up in that way. There's a story, I've never actually read it in its translated form. I've just been told it by a Sufi brother who comes to the center sometimes. He's told me a story from the Quran where it's curious. It almost reminds me of something that there could be such a version of this in samurai mythology. But the story, as I understand it, the story goes that some general, he's in the process of the jihad, and he's fighting this infidel, and the infidel loses, and he's about to strike him down, and the defeated soldier spits at him, and he sheaths his sword and walks away. And my friend explained this to me, that we're in the Middle Ages, and it's just a different time. So, but and it's that he's a warrior. So he said that the guy maybe could chase him down and say, "Why'd you do that? Why'd you spare me?" And the general's answer is that I was like a channel of God, and it was your time to die. It was your time to meet God, and then you spit at me, and I got angry. And once I got angry, it would have been me killing you instead of just your fate, instead of God. And that would have been a sin. I can't take the life of another being. And so I walked away. You can see there's some hypocrisy in the story, but the point is very valid. There's a point in that that you could translate also to the samurai, right? Samurai means service. The samurai is the servant of their lord and willing to die and kill. But it's there's a sense of freedom because they don't order it, or they're not. Hopefully, they're empty. You see. So that which we resist persists, and so the things can be done with love, and you can stand up for injustice without hate. Otherwise, you get tangled up in the thing that you're fighting. Right? If I get angry, the most obvious silly example is just basically if I get very angry because there are angry people in the world, I'm also an angry person. And that cycle of hate won't end. There's always something to be angry about. So that's really my answer is, I didn't really answer your question because your question was like, should we just listen or should we stand up? And I don't have the answer of what you should do. I can just tell you some advice for how to do it, which is like, if you have to take strong action, you can do it without hate. Hate is not necessary. And there's great social warriors that have proven that. Gandhi liberated his country through zero violence.
Another question from that. Alethea Rose is asking, Are wooden tea sinks not recommended for Gongfu tea?
Somebody on the app is asking how I feel about wooden tea sinks. That's a very strong shift gear. We segueing away from large social questions to something very, very down to earth. Wooden tea sinks. If you like using a tea sink, I don't think it matters what the tea sink is made from. There's all kinds of tea sinks. There's plastic ones, metal ones, stone ones, wood ones. What it's made of. There's low quality ones. There's very nice ones. What it's made of, I don't think is relevant to my answer. If you enjoy using those, that's great. Make your tea be happy. In our tradition, we don't use them. I personally don't like them, but I would never state like they are inimical to Gongfu tea or that they're bad for people or something. I'm not going to make such a blanket statement. The only kind of statement I can say is they're not for me, right? So like if I'm a watercolor painter and you're asking me like, what do you think about Smith & Company oil paint? How do I answer that question other than to say Smith & Company oil paints are not for me because I paint with watercolors. In other words, that instrument is not relevant to what I do with tea, but it may be relevant to what other people do with tea. Good for them. If you would like to know a few reasons, first of all, many times they have hoses, and I personally, again, this is what we're talking about. It's like what I'm trying to achieve for tea. You might be trying to achieve is like oil paints and watercolors. You might be trying to achieve a nice chit chat with your girlfriends. And so this particular point that I'm about to make doesn't even matter. But for me, I'm more into sitting and drinking tea meditatively in silence. And those hoses make a lot of noise. They, right? And I don't appreciate that noise. But if you're having a chat about stuff while you drink some tea, and that noise might not even be relevant. Do you see? So it's hard for me to say like, oh, don't use those instruments. It's just to say that those instruments aren't for me, right? They aren't for what we do in our lineage. The other thing is that we practice chashi, and chashi is about every time cleaning and decorating the space as a helpful reminder of a spirit in tea, which in Chinese is I cha I hui, in Japanese ichi go ichie, which means one encounter, one chance. It means that if we meet here for tea every day, you and I, same teaware, it will never be the same. And so it's a reminder to celebrate the occasion and celebrate each other. Because when a friend walks out the door, you may never see them again. And to celebrate the occasion. And I need that in my life, not just for tea. I need it all the time. That's relevant to our slogan for this week, right? I'm immersed in water. I'm immersed in blessings. Millions of blessings, millions of miracles all around me, and I take them for granted. And I need to remember to be more alive, to drink more of life, to celebrate being alive, to celebrate how blessed I am every day that I am alive. And so by decorating and cleaning, which is what humans do all over the world. When you have guests, you clean and you decorate to make those guests feel special and to make the occasion feel special. And I want the occasion of sitting down for tea to be a reminder, even when it's only just me, that this session is unique. It will never happen again. It will always be special. And that goes even for casual sessions, because not all my sessions are silent and meditative. I also have a chat with friends over tea. So some of my sessions are casual, and casual is okay, but I want to celebrate the uniqueness of that casual. And then I make a casual chashi, and we celebrate that casual occasion, which is also having a chat with a friend that, if you're anything like me, you probably don't spend enough time with your friends. And so having the opportunity to sit and have a chat and catch up is a wonderful occasion to be celebrated. And I want as many reminders of that as I can. So I clean and decorate. And that brings me to the last point, which is that a lot of those tea sinks are not very clean. They get dirty really quick. They tend to collect dirt. They tend to be there the same every time. They're sticky, in other words, in the sense that you use them for every tea session again and again. In fact, they might even just stay on the table and then you never leave. And it starts to encourage laziness and maybe lack of cleanliness, and maybe a little bit starts to go a little bit too casual for me. But maybe you want extreme casualness for your tea, in which case it's a great tool for you. It makes things convenient. It catches all the water. It allows you to be sloppy. I don't want to be sloppy. I don't want water to slop around. I want to get better at precision and to pour gracefully and not have an excuse to slosh. But sloshing might be a fun way of playing for you, and that therefore that tool is good for you. It's just not for me. But they tend to collect dirt, and they tend to have an air of casualness. When you have that tea sink, we go to tea shops a lot, and they often have tea sinks, which is where most people get the idea to use one, is because when you go to tea shops tend to have them because they're pouring lots of tea, and so it allows them to do that more conveniently because they're doing it all day long. And to me, it creates a vibe like if the ambience could speak. It's kind of like, hey, I was here making some tea before you came, and you could sit down and have some, or not. You could leave. I don't care. I'm just here pouring some tea. It kind of creates that kind of energy for me, which is kind of the antithesis of what I'm trying to create. I'm not trying to point out that energy is bad, right? I can see actually strengths in it, a looseness, a relaxation, a calmness around friends that allows for a freedom of discourse. I get it. I get even the fun of playing and sloshing. I did that early on in my tea journey. But, I'm a watercolor painter. I more want to focus on, I don't want my guests to feel like I was just here pouring some tea casually and you could have some or not. I don't care. I want my guests to feel like I honor you so much. I honor this occasion. Blessed are we to be together. Blessed are we to have this tea in this time. And frankly, maybe I'm just a dope. Maybe I'm just a fool, because I need more of reminders like that. I just need it every day. I need more reminders of how blessed I am, because I'm forgetful. I forget to be the person I want to be. I forget to celebrate being alive on a regular basis. I take for granted how beautiful it is to be a human being, and how rare and relevant it is, and the power of it. So I want to be reminded as much as possible. So for me, tea sinks get in the way of my tea practice, but I have nothing to say about them. I want to be very clear about this. I paint in watercolors, so my reasons like why I don't like oil. That's actually true. I do paint in water-based pigments, and I don't use oil. And I can tell you reasons why. I don't like the cleanup. You have to use turpentine and chemicals, and it's more messy, and I don't like the way it goes onto the canvas. I don't like the way it mixes. I don't enjoy it. But that doesn't mean when I see an oil painting, I'm like, that sucks. You should have done that with watercolors, right? It's not that. It's a personal thing. It's more about what I'm trying to create. And so if I'm trying to create this, I don't need these tools. And if I'm trying to create this, I don't need these tools. So it's more about what tools you need to create what you're trying to create, right? And in my tradition, we just don't use tea sinks. The other final thing I'll say, also to keep in mind, is that tea sinks are not that old. There's something from the 1980s only. There is a little like cup sink. There's a kind of tea sink that is teeny, that actually goes back to the Qing dynasty. It's actually the basis for the creation of those bigger ones. But those bigger ones really are from the 80s onward.
Lancel is asking, what is your favorite tea?
My favorite tea, we did a whole video about this, Lancel. My favorite tea is the tea that I'm drinking right now. The one that is here. This is my favorite tea right here. You're looking at it. This happens to be ruby red. So ruby red is my favorite tea. The tea that I'm drinking is my favorite tea, not some other tea elsewhere. but the one that I'm drinking. Which is back to our slogan for today, right? Why are the things that I want always what I don't have or what's not here?
Question from Mika. Do you have some tips what to do when suddenly in a situation you lose self-control because of the situation or person?
So do I have tips for what you to do when you lose control because of the situation? Well, your question contains part of the answer. We spoke about this a couple weeks ago. The more you meditate, the more you take responsibility for your state of mind. Your question already implies that you're not doing that, because you're saying that you're losing control because of the situation, as opposed to you're losing control because you have a habit of losing control. In order to change this situation, you have to take full responsibility for the state of your own mind and stop blaming the situation for your mind and your orientation. Situation didn't cause you to lose control, you lost control. If that weren't true, then there would be no remedy other than to constantly try to control the environment so that no triggers arose. Good luck with that. You go even to some beautiful tropical island and there'll be mosquitoes or bugs. There'll be noise. You won't be able to try to force back unwanted situations. That's absurd. So if there is to be a remedy at all, it starts with understanding. This is why it's good news. It may at first sound like bad news to realize that you're 100% responsible for your state of mind. But no, it's actually good news, because that's the only way that you can remedy the situation, is if you are in control. And it absolutely is true that you are. And that's also demonstrated by the fact that if you had 10 people there in that same situation, they would react in 10 different ways. And not everybody would lose control. There is a potential to not lose control in that same situation. And that starts with acknowledging that you are responsible for your state of mind, not the situation that you find yourself in. You're not a pinball. You have control over your state of mind. If you've already lost control and now you're realizing that you did something foolish, then you have to grow up. It's time to grow up. You have to, first of all, address the habit pattern, take full responsibility, make amends if possible. Sometimes making amends is worse than not. Sometimes you can cause more damage by meddling and trying to be sorry and fix things than you did by the original infraction. So sometimes it's better just to give people space. But sometimes you can make amends. You can say you're sorry. You can try to fix things. And you can take full responsibility. It wasn't the situation that made you lose control. You lost control. And that suffering that ensued for yourself and for others is a strong and powerful motivating factor to practice more, to meditate more. Because really the answer, as my teacher always said, there are 3 modes of spiritual cultivation. And you can choose any one you like. Meditation, meditation, or meditation. So the ultimate answer is Zazen. So it looks like we're out of questions. We're talking about really, really deep stuff. I understand that, especially the question about injustice and standing up for injustice is very relevant in the world today. There's a lot of that going on. That a lot of that, it's necessary, that work and shifting human consciousness, waking people up, but do so with love. Remember also, if your neighbor, let's say, is very ignorant, is a bigot, and has done something that is unjust, and there's 2 things to remember. First of all, true punishment should always be done with the intention of correcting that behavior, not punishment for punishment's sake. Revenge doesn't work. Punishment for punishment's sake doesn't work. So even if the punishment should be to correct that behavior in that person and in others, right? So even if the punishment's strong, it might be to deter that behavior from others. But punishment is always to correct. But another way of looking at this, though, is that let's say you can get through to that person. And let's say you can win, in a sense, right? What does that look like? So that person wakes up from their ignorance, wonderful. But now that they've woken up, you're still going to have to live with each other. Your neighbors. You're going to have to live with each other afterwards. So how you go about waking them up will also affect your peace of mind and ability to live. If the method that you use to wake them up destroys the relationship, how are you going to go about being neighbors afterwards? And so, whatever injustice there's all kinds of injustices that I'm hearing about. I'm only mildly tuned into news, but I know there's a lot of protests going around the world, mostly to do with racial inequity, but also other kinds of injustices as well in different countries. And all of that's great. And I don't have any general comment to say other than, where there is injustice, we should stand up and help to create more peace and equality and love. And that these are the seeds of these are the karmic fruits of seeds of the past that us and our ancestors planted. Negativity has created beginningless greed and hatred. And it is important for us to avow that and to take steps to make a more beautiful, peaceful world, to continue to grow, to continue to strive to live in better, more peaceful ways that result in every being's ability to thrive. So, but we should do that in a way that, it's like, if you don't do that with anger or hate, right, you do it with love, the results will be much more efficacious and lasting and lead more towards the goodness that you seek. A lot of rulers in the history of the earth, we can learn from them. They made the mistake of trying to use evil means to get to some good end. They made the mistake that you could destroy things and hurt people and use all kinds of wicked ways or lie and use propaganda to create some utopia or create some beautiful society or state. And all of those efforts always failed, including the first emperor of China, Qin, right? Those efforts always don't work out. You can't build a quality car out of poor quality parts. As we say, right? The ends never justify the means. So even if your end is justice, you can't get there through hurt and hate and destruction. That's my advice. So stay peaceful, stay calm, stay full of love, and then take strong action, if necessary, for what you believe in and what you know to be right. And let us all then pray for a more peaceful, happy world, more equality, more awakening, more consciousness, more discussions of our more frank and open discussions of our problems and where they come from, and the solutions to fix them. I hope you guys have a great week. Drink lots of wonderful tea, and we'll see you next Sunday.